the city in different circumstances. Linda Dorsina Fori is the other folk over there. And she is of Haitian background. Family is from there. She's married to an Irishman who runs a local newspaper, which you may have seen. I'm forgetting the name of it. The Dorchester Reporter, right? But the interesting thing about her is that she also came up through the community. She was a state representative, and then she became a state senator from South Boston. Now, do you all know the history of South Boston in this town? Well, South Boston was a place where we wouldn't go. This is back in the 50, 40, well, all the way up into the 60s. And you know Carson Beach? And you go there now, though, don't you? Yeah. But there was a time you wouldn't set foot there. That's right. You get yourself killed over there, as well as those South Bostoners when they came to Roxbury, Dorchester, they get their ass killed too. But but somewhere in there, then there was busing that all happened in the 70s, and so that really shook things up a lot, and a lot of change came about. Which, you know, we have a lot to learn as yet, but we have come a ways, because now a lot of white folk come throughout Roxbury, Dorchester, and a lot of black folk go throughout South Boston and go to the beach now and play volleyball over there. And so things have changed, but there's a hell of a lot more to change. So that's a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about this book.
Mr. West. Give us a little background in your photojournalism journey. How did you become a photojournalist, and talk a little bit about the newspapers that you photojournalist in?
Well, I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I've been very fortunate to be able to take photographs and make a living out of taking photographs, and being on my own and being able to call my own shots for the most part. Working for I started off with the Bay State Banner. Now, all right, any of you familiar with the Bay State Banner?
Yes.
Okay. You know they just changed ownership, and this new ownership seems to be very ambitious, and I think I'm going to do a very good job with the paper. And I was also shooting for United Press International at that time. This was back in the 80s. And between those two news organizations, it really gave me opportunity to meet people in circumstance on all levels of our society, from presidents, governors, to folk in the neighborhood. And it was a wonderful experience to do all that. And it gave me then wider coverage with the New York Times, and, Ebony Magazine, Jet Magazine. It opened up over time. And I really encourage any of you who are photographically minded to try the news business to start off, because you meet a lot of people. You're exposed to a lot of different situations, and if you know how to kind of work yourself, you can be very successful. Of course, you got to be a good photographer, so you learn how to do that too as a basis.
Now, Mr. West, please give us the distinction between a photographer and a photojournalist.
Well, photojournalist is just someone who's a photographer who takes it in a certain direction. In other words, they're trying to tell stories with images, with photographs, rather than being written. So a photojournalist would be just that.
I noticed you had a few markers in your book, Portraits of Purpose. I was wondering if you could read a passage or two.
I don't know if I can do that.
You take pictures, you don't read?
No. Well, let me tell you some stories. Can I tell you a story rather than try to read a passage? Let me tell you the story of Linda Dorsina Fori. She, as I went through, she went through the process of becoming a state senator from South Boston. Now, she was the first woman senator from South Boston, but she was the first black person to be a senator from South Boston. Remember what South Boston has been. And when she became a senator, about 10 years ago, somewhere in there. So things were still a little rocky there. And there was every St. Patrick's Day, there was the St. Patrick's breakfast. It was a tradition. in Boston, where all the politicians and all the community would hang out and come to this breakfast. And in the breakfast, there was people of color involved in that, so it wasn't exclusively just all white folk. But the person who ran the, who was the maitre d', was the MC of the event, was Irish and was the state senator from South Boston, and was always a white senator from South Boston. So with Linda, the first time she was going to be the MC, the person who was there before her boycotted her. And he went to Ireland on St. Patrick's Day. He wouldn't even attend. So she made a video. Now, this St. Patrick's Day breakfast was a roast. So people, the politicians used to roast each other and make fun of each other in different ways. So she made a video, and the bottom line of it, she made fun of this particular guy in a certain part of it. And if you've been in Faneuil Hall, there's a portrait of George Washington standing with his horse, but on the back end of his horse. So at the end of the video, this picture came up, and this was her statement to who she thought this guy was a horse's ass. So it was just an interesting scenario that day. So that's one of the stories from Linda.
Tell us a little bit about the national artists that you had opportunity to photograph on your photographic journey. I know that Nelson Mandela on a national level was certainly one of them.
Well, Nelson Mandela probably was the highlight of my whole career. To meet him and to see him and be with him for about a day and a half. I was his official photographer at the time he was in Boston. And we went through a whole retinue of places that particular day. We started off with Madison Park High School, where some of you, I think, might have been there. And from there we went to the Kennedy Library, where there was a big luncheon. Stevie Wonder sang at that. And from there we went to the Esplanade, where there was about, 20 or 30,000 people. So it was quite an exciting day. And I actually got a chance to shake his hand. We were at the Kennedy Center, and we were in a kind of a holding room, so-called green room, which was actually one of the special rooms in the Kennedy Library, where there were a lot of artifacts and so forth. So Ted Kennedy and he were kind of walking around, looking at different things. And at some point, Mandela was by himself. So I said, I'm gonna go over and say something to him. So I went over and I put out my hand and shook his hand. And he was a boxer when he was a younger man. And he had a ham of a hand. So when I shook his hand, my hand disappeared into his hand. But anyway, I said a couple of words of thanks for what he had done and who he was. So I took my moment, So that was one of it. And the other thing too, from a photography point of view, just for those of you who might be interested in news photography or that sort of thing, a lot of what you do is anticipatory. You get pictures, you've all seen all kinds of pictures and photographs in different situations, sports and other things. Nothing happens, for the most part, nothing happens because it just happens. Photographers know where to be at the right time. And when we all came down from this green room, down into the main part of the library, if you're familiar with that library in that big, huge space, Mandela was shaking hands all the way to get up to the podium area. And up at that end was Stevie Wonder. So to me, that was the picture. So I'm just going along, taking pictures of him shaking all these hands, but I'm anticipating Stevie, and I'm anticipating where am I going to be to get that picture.
That's right.
So I got in the right place and I got the picture. But I'm only saying that a lot of all of photography is anticipation and knowing what you're going to do before you get there. You're thinking about it. And I think that's probably true in many things that we do in life, that we anticipate what's going to happen and where we need to be at the right moment.
I would love for you to highlight one or two other people. I know that you took pictures of Nina Simone as well as Elma Lewis.
Well, Nina Simone, I only photographed once, and she was on her final tour, and she came through Boston, and she was playing at Symphony Hall. So I had the opportunity to take a picture of her. But I also got backstage, and there was a moment backstage where she didn't suffer fools lightly, and somebody said something in a certain way, and she straightened right up. So she was an interesting personality, and you should explore her more, because she was also a social activist. And what was the main song that she sang? There was a couple of them.
I know my
Black-
big favorite
Black
one
and
is, yep, but also the Four Women.
No, the goddamn, what was it?
Oh, hanging from the.
No. Chip, you should know that song. No, I can't think of it. Anyway.
Did she do I'm Young, I'm Black and I'm Proud?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
But Mississippi, goddamn, that's what it was. Mississippi, goddamn,
Yeah.
that's what it was. And the other one you said was
Elma Lewis.
Lewis. Do you all know who Elma Lewis was?
Yeah.
Well, Elma Lewis was...
Raise your hand, who knows Elma Lewis?
A little.
Okay,
She used to
we
do
got
something in the Playhouse.
1, 2, 3,
Art in the
4.
Playhouse or
Okay,
something.
who's Elma Lewis? Excellent. Anybody else want to add to that?
She used to do like plays in the park or something like that.
Yeah.
Theater in the park.
And she also did, what's the Christmas piece?
Black Nativity.
The
Black Nativity.
Have you all seen that? Yeah. Anyway, she was a major force in the arts community in Boston. And I don't, is she, I don't think she's on part of this front cover though. But she was very important, and you'll never find it quickly.
Is it the Black?
The one,
I'm looking for it.
the one mistake we made with this book is we didn't do the glossary alpha. We did it by the sequence of people who are in the book, so you can't really pick it out real quick.
So the last person I'd like you to highlight is Mel King.
Oh yes.
And how many of us know Mel King?
A little.
Mel King, to many of us, was the Nelson Mandela of Boston.
Right.
He
Activist.
probably was the most iconic and supportive and accomplished social activist in this town over the last 50-some years. He passed away this past year, and to the chagrin of all of us, because he was a great loss. And he's on the cover of the book. Oh, you got it right there, yeah. And I'm really proud of that particular portrait, because most of the time that you see Mel, he's very ominous in certain ways. And I think I got the sensitive part of it in this particular picture. He ran for mayor of Boston some years ago. I think it was in 83
Yes.
or 93. 83. I'm not good on time, because it just goes like... he ran for mayor, and he was the first person of color to be in the final runoff to be mayor, and he ran against Ray Flynn at the time. And both of them were kind of community-oriented, and so when Ray, who did win, really took up a lot of Mel's campaign ideas and so forth, and brought in a lot of people of color into his administration. And they became good friends over the years. So Mel's accomplishments are great. And if you have any history books on him, Google him, and you'll see who Mel King was. But read his book and you'll also see who he was.
Are there any final remarks you'd like to share with the young people about becoming a photojournalist or embarking on following leadership as you have done all these years?
Well, mostly, you start off in life and you're wondering what the hell you're going to do. You're 17, 18, 19 years old, 20 years old. What am I going to do? And look to your talents, because we all have some talent in some direction. And I think you need to do just that, is follow your talent and follow your instinct and follow doing the right thing to do that has to do with furthering the human experience in a positive way. And so there's many different channels and avenues for that. I chose at a late time. Now I started photography late in life and did a number of other things before photography, but it was always in the background. It was sort of a hobby for me. But at one point, I was living in other places, California and other places, and I came back to Boston, and I decided to get into photography because